I guess 3, 2, 1. Oh my goodness. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is for you. I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Zach Schomler. Joining me on the right, Austin Cram. How are you?
I'm doing well, Zach. As always, doing well. Glad to be here.
It's hot. By the way, it's episode 363. We're like 6 episodes from the glorious 369. Nice. That'd be fun to say. It's 115 degrees here in Portland. I live in Vancouver, outside of Portland. You have no AC. I feel horrible for you. How are you doing?
I've got a portable AC. If people that have been watching our hockey episodes might notice a change in backdrop for me. I've moved into a different room of the house that is a little bit cooler, has a portable AC. We're gonna push through, but it's absolutely blazing.
I learned a new term this week. It's called heat dome. I don't really understand. It's some scientific term that makes
Explain.
Well, so basically, I'm not a scientist, so everything I'm about to say, take it all with a grain of salt. Basically, there's like high pressure causing heat usually rises, but it's causing it to come down because of pressure above us from somewhere. Then there's desert heat coming from the breeze. Plus, the sun is like the highest part of the year. It's the end of June, so the sun is like exactly where it needs to be to produce a maximum amount of heat.
Okay.
And then there's some other factor. There's something else I don't remember. It's hot as balls. It's awful. My thought today, we'll talk about the 2 previous series in the NHL. Then we'll move forward and talk about our thoughts, kind of preview the NHL Stanley Cup Finals. I guess we should start with the big surprise, which was the Canadiens. We were talking over text, and you're like, "Man, all my predictions keep coming up wrong." But I don't think anybody could have predicted that the Montreal Canadiens would end up beating the Golden Knights, moving on to the Stanley Cup Finals. What are your thoughts on this series? It went 6 games. Were you as shocked as I was?
I was. I want to interject really quickly. Do you have some sort of an email, like a mailbag that people can send you stuff?
Yeah,
questions,
I do. People send me questions on Patreon. That's how they. So when people send in stuff, that's how they do it.
I would encourage. I'm gonna ask your audience to do this for you. I would encourage anybody who has like an NHL.com bracket or some sort of equivalent that filled it out in earnest, that was serious about them filling it out. If you picked Montreal to get here, please send it to Zach. I want to see it.
Honestly, I don't care if you're on. I don't care how you send it. Send it on Instagram.
Send it somewhere.
I don't use Facebook, but you can try it. Find a way to contact me because I would be curious if anybody did. I'm sure Montreal fans didn't even expect their team to be here.
I mean, there's always going to be the Montreal homers that are, that would pick their team to go all the way. That's what I'm saying.
I knew
you have
it!
to qualify it in earnest. Like, you have to be like, I really genuinely filled it out because I believe this was going to go this way. If you're one of those people who had Montreal going here and you filled it out in that way, I would love to see how the rest of your bracket shook out, because it could have been glorious or it could have been terrible. But either way, Montreal being here is without a doubt the biggest surprise of the postseason. It's absurd. Like I said last time we were here, they were a 500 team in the regular season who manages, they've gotten hot at the right time. And what are you going to do? I think you liken them to the the 2011 Giants last time we were talking, the 2007 Giants, one of those Giants teams that won the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, they beat the Patriots. They were massive underdogs, and they were like 7-9. They weren't even a 500 team, or they were 9-7. They were barely 500. Made the playoffs, won the Super Bowl. This is a team that should have not really made the playoffs, right, with Montreal, and we're going like they made it here somehow.
Making the playoffs, yeah, they have that record that it's going to come down to it, and it did for them. Making the postseason, and who knows if this is an 82 game season, we could be having a much different conversation, I suppose. But it's shocking. It baffles the mind. I mean, we saw it. I texted you about it. We saw the Kings and the Kings team that game 81 is when they made it. That was the 2011-2012 LA Kings. They didn't qualify for the postseason until game 81 of 82, and they were an 8 seed, and they go 16-4 in the postseason. They light it up. Jonathan Quick has an insane postseason. He was their goalie at the time, and you're seeing a similar thing with Carey Price here, where he's taken over 3 series now, and they've gotten contributions from the rest of their skaters. Don't get me wrong; they've played great team hockey, but it starts with the man in net. We're seeing some similarities between that Kings team that went all the way and this Montreal team, I think.
Well, I almost go back to the Colorado Avalanche, where if Colorado had beat Vegas, and we had seen Vegas versus the Canadiens, we'd seen Colorado versus Canadiens instead of Vegas versus Montreal, I don't know that the Canadiens would have beat the Colorado Avalanche either. And so it's kind of this weird amount of circumstances that led us to this moment where now Montreal's the team moving forward rather than one of the other teams that I thought were better.
Yeah, you make a good point. It's hard for me to say Montreal wouldn't have beaten anybody at this point. They keep beating teams that you wouldn't think they would beat. So you could put them up against like the 81 Islanders, and it's like maybe they win. Like who knows? It's they should have lost to all these teams on paper, and they just keep winning. And again, credit them. I'm not trying to discredit their performance because they clearly deserve to be here. They're playing phenomenal hockey, and they deserve everything they've gotten. It's just it baffles the mind when you look at their regular season performance and you look at their record. You wouldn't think this is a team that makes it all the way here, but here they are. So again, credit to them, props to them. I hope they finish it off, honestly.
Well, it makes me wonder a couple things because of the way that the regular season was structured. You only played in your division. And then you look at a team, and I'm going to make a football reference because I always do. Last year, the Buccaneers won the Super Bowl, and week 1 to week 17, they were a different team. They got better as the year went on, and they caught fire in the playoffs and made a Super Bowl run.
What week was it they got shelled by New Orleans? Was it week 3 or 4?
It was like week 4, yeah. They just got embarrassed.
3 or 4, yeah. It was like, and then that's when the media, and we always make it about football for 45 seconds during these, but that's just the way it goes. But
yeah.
But that was when the media, and media is different for hockey because it's not as big of a sport. Montreal media is a different thing because we don't see a lot of it here in the United States because they're obviously up in Canada. It's mostly French, which also makes it tough to follow along with. But the Montreal media, for the Canadians, it's all they have. So it's like it's everything. So while I wasn't following a ton of Montreal media early in the season, I'm sure that there was plenty of, back and forth about what's wrong here, what's wrong there. And I know that the media was doing it on a national level with the Buccaneers, the example that you make. So, yeah, I think that's actually a pretty decent comparison. It's a team that, I think the Bucs had a more talented roster than the Canadians do if you could translate that across sports. But it's still the idea of the point you're making is that it seems like this team has changed from the start of the year to now, and even the start of the postseason to now. I mean, this was a team that was down 3-1 to the Maple Leafs, and it wasn't all that surprising. And in the course of 3 weeks, a month, it's completely shifted.
Well, I wonder if that series against Toronto gave them confidence. Like that, there was something that clicked
100%.
in that game 4 or 5, whatever that moment was, where they won 3 in a row, they win the series, and then move on. There had to have been a moment where like, wait, because I remember I had a moment when I played football back in the day where I had a game where I just broke every record, literally passing-wise, and from that point on, I was rolling. And it just took me, once I found my stride, I never looked back. And maybe it's a team that once it clicked for them, they just, because we were talking in the pre-show about how there were 3 overtime games, but then game 6, they won 4-0, and it just looked, it was not even a competition. It was really weird how I felt like the Vegas Golden Knights just laid down in game 6. It was really weird.
Yeah, so of the 6 games, 4 of them ended a 1-goal game and 3 of them ended in overtime. I mean, so you could, the series was pretty close in terms of, the raw stats, the goals for, the goals against. This is a very close series. The 2 games that weren't 1-goal games ended 4-1. 1 for Vegas, 1 for Montreal in games 1 and 5 respectively. In games 2, 3, 4, and 6, all 1-goal games, and all but game 2 were overtime games. So this was a very close series most of the time. It was a very high-stress, high-tension series for most of it. But, that's hockey. We've talked about it a lot. We've kind of beat it into the ground, how a couple of things going a different way, can shift things. And the huge example is the game 3 with Fleury giving up that awful gimme goal with about 90 seconds left in the third period. And that, Vegas won the next game in overtime, but it seemed like there was a shift in, I don't know if it was just in me and in the fans as opposed to, the players, you never know. But it seemed like from there it was, because it was 1-1 going into that game, and you think, okay, Montreal takes game 2. They're gonna, Vegas probably doesn't shut them out, right? But I think the general consensus still belongs to Vegas after that game 2 when it's split. And then you get that overtime game, and Vegas is on the verge of going up 2-1 with, again, 90 seconds left some odd, and then they give up this awful goal. Tides turn, Montreal wins in overtime, and suddenly it's 2-1 going the other way, and Vegas is gripping a little bit, and that's how fast things turn in the sport.
It felt like unraveling, where you see a team go,
Absolutely.
oh my gosh, and then you're reeling, trying to recover from that horrible loss, and they never did. It was,
and that's what happened in round 1 too, right? I mean, you've got Montreal wins the first game of that series, and then and then Toronto wins 3 straight, and you're thinking, okay, this is a gentleman's sweep in the making, and something clicked that Game 5, and Montreal since then has not looked back.
I would love to talk to a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. Like, everyone thought this is our year, it's our chance, and then the other, big Canadian team, Montreal Canadiens go instead of you to the Stanley Cup Finals. And we always talk, you hear all the time, Canadian teams can't win in the NHL, which is nonsense and stupid. But I think about how cool it would be if the Montreal Canadiens, this Cinderella story, found a way to win the NHL Stanley Cup Finals. I'd be like, that's unbelievable.
And it's not even, and people do this every year. They try to find, especially people that don't like the Canadiens, are going to find ways to make this, or I guess will attempt to find ways to make this an asterisk championship. They're going to call it a fake title. Everybody does that. It's kind of just being as part of being a sports fan. They're going to say, well, Tavares got hurt in the first game and that changed things. You know what? It did, and that's the way that things go. This happens every year in every sport. Guys get hurt. Things break weird. It's the way it goes. But the butterfly effect of that, Tavares injury early, game 1 of the postseason, if he's healthy, Toronto probably ends up winning one of those games, 5, 6, or 7, I would assume. You have to assume that. And then who knows what happens? We're in a completely different thing. But the path that Montreal has taken, going through Toronto, who even without their captain is still an exceptional team, going through Winnipeg, who I think was the worst team they've played so far, but still a formidable opponent, and they've got a great goaltender. So, you can't say too much about Winnipeg. You can't try to discount them too much. And then Vegas, who was a lot of people's favorite to win it all when this thing first started, and now Tampa, who, coming off of a title, has a crazy loaded roster. This is an insane path Montreal's had to go through, and if they do manage to pull it off, the resume is outrageous. This is one of the most improbable, unlikely, and insane titles in the last, however many decades, I would imagine. It's just crazy what they've done.
Well, again, I can't help but make another comparison to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where the Buccaneers beat Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, and Patrick Mahomes on their way to winning a title. If Montreal did that, it'd be a similar, like, you beat who, and who, and who, and then got here and won a title. It's just an improbable, unbelievable story.
It is,
especially for
100%.
a wild card team.
Yeah, this is can't be stated enough. This is a team that was so close to not making it in. I mean, they were only 4 points up on Calgary for that final 4th playoff spot in the North, and 4 points is kind of a lot, but it's 2 wins. I mean, it's not that different in terms of point percentage. They were a team that was on the brink up until the last couple of weeks of the season, or even sooner, of not making it. A -9 goal differential in the regular season, which is not abhorrent, but it's not good. Like, you got scored on more than you scored in the regular season, so that's not a team you'd think of as a playoff team. But here they are.
Yeah, I feel weird because, full transparency, I always try to tell the audience exactly what's going on behind the scenes. It's interesting. Like, we only have 3 big topics today because we have 2 series, and we'll preview the next one. As in the past, we've had so many games to talk about and so many series to talk about. So I'm like, we're only 12 minutes in, but it's like, I guess, is that all we have to say? Because it's just shock, and then I guess we'll talk about the future moving forward with the Stanley Cup Finals. But is there anything else you want to add about this series before we move on to the Lightning and Islanders?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what we saw on the ice, I mean, I think and we're talking a lot about the story, and I think that's important to talk about because that's what's gonna live on. But in terms of actually what happened on the ice, I think Vegas just had a tough time keeping up with the tenacity, the pace of play that Montreal threw at them. Cole Caulfield's having a coming out party that rivals many the last several seasons in the playoffs. He's this young kid. He's coming alive. He's got 9 goals in the postseason now. I want to say something like that. He's playing very, very well, and they've got guys. Nick Suzuki. That's worth bringing up. So Nick Suzuki was actually a part of the Vegas system. He was a minor leaguer. He was one of their draft picks, and he was sent to Montreal when Montreal traded away Max Pacioretty to Vegas, and Max Pacioretty now one of Vegas's best players. This veteran goal scorer, really great player, really good guy too. Kind of unrelated, but he's made. He's
easy to root for.
he's incredibly easy to root for. Family man. The NHL used to do this Road to the Winter Classic type thing, and really quickly, the Winter Classic is this game played on New Year's Day every year. It's between two teams, and it's an outdoor game. So
I love it. It's one of the only hockey games I watched as a kid growing up because it's such a cool event.
Yeah, and the NHL used to put on this thing. I think it was on HBO or Showtime several years back, where it was like an uncensored, like behind-the-scenes lead up for the two teams playing from their seasons to this point. Look at locker room stuff and who's hurt and didn't play. It's really gritty, kind of hard-hitting stuff that was on. It looks at either HBO or Showtime. I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
And Montreal was featured in one of these one year, and Max Pacioretty, when he was playing for Montreal, was in this, and he just seemed like a really good guy, good family man, guy that's easy to root for, and he's a great player. So that's kind of the tangent there. But he was traded for Nick Suzuki to Vegas, so they swapped, and now they play each other in the semifinals. Suzuki has a great series, and you're looking like, obviously one series doesn't make or break any trade, I don't think, but looking back at it, you think, man, this guy was a contributor.
It's a direct comparison. I mean, like, any direct comparison really makes you look back and go,
It's hard to blame one guy or put anything on one guy for anything that happens in a hockey series, much less, a hockey season. But it's just an interesting look back through the history, and you think, man, this was kind of this was a big trade just a few years back for Pacioretty to send him to Vegas, to give Vegas that much needed punch. That what they would eventually build their Stanley Cup final run off of in their subsequent playoff appearances. And now you get a chance to see these two on the ice at the same time when, the stakes are almost as high as they get. And Suzuki plays an exceptional series, and Montreal wins it in 7. So, again, it's not one guy. It's not because of Pacioretty. It's not because of Suzuki that this result happened. It's just an interesting way to look back at it because you so rarely get a chance to see, especially when it's cross-conference. You don't get to see that unless it's in the Cup final, except for in years like this. So it's kind of a fun look back at that trade and see, the consequences of what has happened. But it's not like Vegas is upset about it. I mean, they would have liked the Stanley Cup, but they've only seen tremendous success since they've been in the league. So it's not like they're hurting. It's just, it's kind of an interesting thing to look at.
As I look at Tampa Bay, the New York Islanders, I was pretty heartbroken. Like, we had a 7-game series. It was so fun. We had the last game ever in that building they play in on Long Island. They had the last game ever in
Nassau Coliseum. Yep.
Yeah, and the last game ever, Game 6, was a win at home for the New York Islanders. That's pretty cool. But they lost in 7, and that was a phenomenal series. Only one of the games went to overtime, but it was like anytime a series goes 7, it's incredibly entertaining. And I guess we shouldn't be surprised it was the Tampa Bay Lightning. We've talked a lot about how they kind of found a way to beat the salary cap, and they got Steven Stamkos, a couple other people. And I was just my initial reaction was I'm so upset that the Islanders didn't move on. I wanted to see them win a title or at least go to a title game, a title series. And what are your initial thoughts, just gut reaction to what happened?
The Islanders gave it all they had, man. Like, this was they shouldn't feel, they shouldn't feel bad about anything that they've done. They ran into a great team and they ran into a great goaltender, and that's what's going to happen. They just couldn't quite. They weren't as opportunistic as they'd been in the postseason to this point. That's kind of what I've referred to them as. Is they're an opportunistic team. They take advantage of everything. They're stout defensively, and they work hard. And that's kind of the team identity. That's a very Barry Trotz thing. He's their man behind the bench, their head coach, and that's kind of the cornerstones of what he builds teams off of. Is this being defensively responsible and working hard and making the fundamental play and playing really strong quality hockey. And that's what the Islanders have done to this point. They just ran into a team with too much firepower and too much help, on all 200 feet of the ice from their goaltending all the way on up. And that was, nothing I think showed that quite as well as that Game 5 did when Tampa wins 8-0. And that was the most lopsided game of the postseason. I would assume. I think that was. I don't know of any other games.
Well, it still stood out as like, wow.
It still stood out as like, and it was Game 5 too, right? So
it's a beatdown.
So going into that game, we're tied at 2, and it's a best of 3 at this point. Going into Game 5, tied at 2, who knows what happens? And then Tampa comes out and just they score early and they never look back. And credit the Islanders for coming back Game 6 and taking a gritty overtime win to take it to 7. But that Game 5, although we hadn't quite seen it the same way to that point, a little bit in Game 2 when it ended 4-2 Tampa. But nothing quite till that Game 5 had we seen Tampa really just like flex the way that they can and did in that game, in that series. And that to me, after that, even though it went to 7, and obviously, a team wins game 5, you think, okay, crazy, you think they're going to win, one of the next 2, what a hot take. So it's not to say that, like, I was some genius for saying that or thinking that, but after that 8-0 beat down game 5, it really seemed like this was Tampa's to lose. I just thought that was going to propel them with the confidence and feeling good about yourself. You put that kind of a beat down on a team in game 5.
Well, and then I would assume they're going to win the finals. I mean, Montreal's a great story, and Montreal keeps overcoming over and over and over again. But I would imagine Tampa Bay wins the whole thing again, back to back. I guess because they won last year too.
Yeah, they did, and this is what I think kind of gets lost in how crazy this postseason has been. In that you have Tampa, who's got a largely unchanged roster from last year. It's not that crazy that they're here. The regular season wasn't as great as it could have been. We know a huge reason why that is. But I think they kind of got into that thing that a lot of championship teams do, where the regular season starts to matter a little bit less. This is a team in Tampa Bay that's been successful for the past decade. I mean, they've made several deep postseason runs, and nothing quite the same as last year where they win it all. This is a team that knows that it matters the absolute most when you get into the spring and summer. So you look at Tampa Bay throughout the season, and it's they're maybe not quite the same, not quite as consistent, or not winning the same way they were last year. I was never one of the people who was extremely worried about them. I had a feeling that when we got into this point of the season, it was going to really take off for them. And sure enough, it has. And Point and Kucharov have been stupendous. And Kucharov, obviously, they missed in the regular season. We've talked at large about that. It shouldn't be that surprising that they're here, and it won't be that surprising if they win the whole thing, because this is ultimately, at the end of the day, just a really, really, really good hockey team that's incredibly deep, very well coached, very experienced, very skilled. And when you run into that, you're going to have a hard time no matter who you are. And that's why, despite what's happened the past 3 rounds over on the west side with Montreal, I have to pick Tampa here. Just because this has happened before in this same fashion with Montreal, they've beat teams that I didn't think they were going to beat, or that people didn't think they would have beat. You have to look at everything I just went over, and I don't see how, short of the great story, short of some momentum, I don't see a lot of on-ice ways that Montreal can win. But who knows? I hope that we're back here in a couple of weeks, and I look dumb, because that would mean that there's a really cool Cinderella story that finished off. So that's what I'm rooting for.
Yeah, unfortunately, story doesn't win titles.
It doesn't.
I would love that to be the case. And by the way, I've watched pretty sparsely. I've been off and on. I watched Game 6. I watched Game 7. I watched Game 5. Game 6 of the Montreal series. I watched 6 and 7 of the Islanders Lightning series. I'm really excited. Monday night. This will come out Monday morning. So Monday night is Game 1 in Tampa. And I'm going to watch every game of the series. Hopefully we'll be texting back and forth. I'm really all in. It feels so much more manageable to have one series rather than 2 to watch and keep track of it at the same time. But I can't wait. I think it'd be really interesting. And really the question is, can Montreal, this massive underdog, even make it interesting? I think we're at the question. They're going to show, first of all, they're going to keep it interesting. And then by Game 3, if it's like 2-1 or whatever, if it's actually close, then we can go, okay, now we've got a series going. But before we talk about Montreal winning, Montreal has to show that they can at least make it interesting.
I think they've got goaltending that's going to make it. That's going to be able to make it interesting. They've got Carey Price, who I've said on this show before, and I believe it, that Connor Hellebuck is the goalie. That if you're choosing to start a team with a goalie, you choose him. But right now, in terms of who's playing the best, it is Carey Price. He's playing. I mean, it's just been, been absurd, and Hellebuck was playing at the same level for a round and a half too, but Carey Price has now done it for 3 long rounds. I guess 2 long rounds and a sweep, but he's done it for an extended period of time. He's looking absolutely amazing. He looks like Carey Price of old. That's the kind of guy. That's the quality of goaltender that you only got to win 4 games, and a goalie like that can win you 4 games. So that's for all the hand wringing that we do about Tampa and how good they are in this roster and they're well coached and all this and that. Ultimately, if Price keeps playing the way that he has been, there's no reason that this Montreal team can't win 4 and 7. It absolutely can happen, and I hope we see it. This is a guy, like I said before, that deserves it. And like I said, I hope we see it.
Would you give Carey Price the MVP of the playoffs so far till this point?
If they win, I would give it to him. and this is a Montreal team that's played a very strong team game. They get contributions up and down the roster, and on ways that the stat sheet doesn't reflect always. They have guys that hustle. They have guys that hit. They have guys that make those off the box score plays, and that's part of what's gotten them here. So if you're gonna pick an MVP coming out of Montreal, it would be Carey Price. I think my MVP right now, funny enough as it is for this postseason, is probably Nikita Kucharov in Tampa. And you know who to thunk that when you take 6 months off and you come into the postseason fresh, you're going to play really, really well. He's dominated play. His presence is felt so strongly every time he touches the ice. He's got 27 points in 18 games. I mean, so you're a 1.5 per game in the postseason is absurd. He's only got 5 goals, which is kind of interesting because he's kind of known as a goal scorer. He's like the sniper. Right now, that's been Braden Point, who has 14 goals in 18 games. He's almost a goal per game. That's just another, like, that's just an outrageous
It's
pace.
unbelievable. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. It's such a crazy pace. But Kucherov has 22 assists, and those are kind of a chicken and an egg thing because they play on the same line together. So if one guy's scoring a bunch of goals, one guy's probably gonna have a bunch of assists too, right? But you'd think it would have been the opposite, whereas Point is like the assist man, and Kucherov is burying all the goals. It's totally not been that way. I don't think anybody in Tampa minds. Right now, I think it's either Kucherov or Point, and I would lean Kucherov, even though Point has the goals. I think Kucherov is driving play more. Personally, he's got 17 power play points, and that Tampa power play has been absolutely insane, and he's driving that again, like I said. So I think that's the guy that you look at as a playoff MVP right now. But if Montreal wins and they don't have one crazy breakout performance from one guy that merits it going to someone other than Price, I think it's Carey Price.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the NBA, you have right now Devin Booker's the leading scorer for the Phoenix Suns, but I would actually give their MVP to Chris Paul, who is taking the ball off the court every time, creating opportunities. Like, just because you have better numbers doesn't necessarily mean you're more valuable. Is missing Kucherov is why Tampa had such a rough regular season career. I mean, not quite the same level. I mean, rough is relative, but it's why they weren't as good during the regular season.
I was going to say I wouldn't even say rough because it wasn't rough. Like they were very good. Like that's the crazy part of all this, right? Is like even after all of this, you look at Tampa. They made the playoffs comfortably. Like they were third in the Central, the Discover Central Division. Discover card shout out. Nashville was fourth, and they were 9 points back. And they were like 5 wins back on Tampa. So Tampa very, very comfortably took third in their division and challenged for fourth and even challenged for fifth. They're only 5 points back on first in the division. So it's not like this was a team that had a rough go of it. They clearly, like I said, I think suffered from not having who I think is their best player, which is, and you don't have your best player, you have 75 points, you come third in your division. That's absurd. But they don't have their best player, and again, I think that there's, this likelihood of coasting that you do when you know you're going to make the postseason, you know you're going to have your guy back, and you know that you won it last year. I think it's just hard to get up for game 49, or I guess game 37 or something, like a Wednesday night game in freezing Minnesota when you know you're going to make the postseason. It's just hard to get up for. I think that's kind of their deal. But I was never worried. They deserve to be here, and I think that break, so to say, that they've taken, both Kucherov and the team itself, has definitely helped them.
Well, also the Warriors went like 72-9 or 71-9, whatever it was, and didn't win a title. Yeah. So they realized, I'm sure Tampa realized after winning a title, hey, we don't have to go quite as hard during the regular season. We can take care of our bodies. There's no urgency mid-season when we know that what really matters is getting into the playoffs, and once we're in, then we got to win. But coasting makes total sense if you've already gotten a title.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, actually, because Tampa actually did like a similar thing where it was the 2018-19 season, and Tampa actually tied the 95-96 Red Wings, which was like a whole nother story. That was before the salary cap existed in the NHL, and Detroit bought this super team in the mid-90s. And Tampa in 18-19 actually tied their win count. So Tampa in 18-19 had this like iconic, all-time, amazing, tremendous season. They finished 1 seed handily. They played this Columbus Blue Jackets team that made the playoffs in their second to last game. Tampa Bay won the President's Trophy, which is the regular season champion, obviously, and they'd beaten Columbus in all 3 regular season games by these crazy margins, and Columbus swept them.
Well, look at the Colorado Avalanche. They won the President's Trophy too, and they're not here.
It was more the example that you said. I think you use the Warriors, and that's a very poignant example. But there's an even better one in that this Tampa team looked a lot like that Warriors team. It looked a lot like this, like one of the best teams we've seen in decades. Both those teams were, and while the Warriors ended up making the finals, and it took 7 to beat them, Tampa gets swept in the first. You're still not walking away with the title, no matter how you look at it. So you make a good point. You don't have to go balls to the wall in the regular season if you know that you've got the stuff in the postseason that where you finish doesn't quite matter. I'm sure that Tampa's learned from that. They see a lot of those guys in that 18-19 team are still there. So while it's really awesome to win a President's Trophy and to have this historic season, I'm sure all those guys would have liked to have hoisted the cup more. And now they're in a very good position to do that. And I think a lot of that's because of some of the tribulations that they went through in that 2019 postseason series.
Montreal's goalie, Carey Price, is kind of we think it's the most important factor for them if they're going to somehow find a way to beat Tampa. Is there anything else Montreal can or needs to do to beat Tampa?
They're going to need to continue to get production out of their depth guys. They're going to need to continue to get guys on their second, third, fourth lines taking care of business. Cole Caulfield's been tremendous. We talked about him a little bit. He's going to have to turn it up again because he's going to have, he's going to have his toughest test, I would say, the postseason so far in terms of just what they're going to throw at him. Tampa is on like an X's and O's perspective to keep him grounded. Tampa plays with a lot more speed. They kind of play in that similar way where a lot of what we saw with Montreal, who's, they utilize their younger, speedier, more fleet of foot guys in kind of fun ways. Tampa's more equipped, I think, to be able to take care of that. So they're going to have to figure out ways to get those guys in space and get them, being effective in perhaps a different way than they did with Vegas. But it's going to be contributions from all 4 lines and from all 3 pairs of defensemen because Tampa's going to do that. Because Tampa has 12 forwards and 6 defensemen who are going to go out there and play very, very well. And Montreal needs to match that. So there's not, it's kind of a boring answer, right? There's not one thing. I can't say there's one player, there's one this, there's one that. They just need to get contributions from everybody. They can't lean on one guy. They can't lean on Toffoli. They can't lean on Caulfield. They can't lean on Petrie. It's going to have to be all hands on deck, working hard, doing the little things, clearing pucks, getting shots on the net, taking care of screens, just the little gritty stuff you hear about. It's kind of a meme at this point in the hockey community. It's, it's doing the little things. It's making the tough play, but that's really what it's going to have to be because you're not going to outskill this Tampa team. You have to outwork them.
Well, that's how the Canadians have gotten here to this point, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, they've played so well together as a team. It's not been one person. It's been the group playing well together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. And it's going to have to continue. They're going to have to ramp that up, to the nth degree to keep that, alive because, again, you're going to have a really hard time out-talenting this Tampa team. So it's going to have to be this thing where we, out-cohesive them and we outwork them, which, again, is like a super stereotypical sports trope, but it's that way for a reason. And
it's a thing, though.
It's a thing. I think Kevin Durant said it right. Like it's hard work. Hard work beats talent when talent refuses to work hard. It's the same deal, and I don't think Tampa's going to do that. I think Vegas was a little guilty of that, to be honest. I think Vegas laid down a little bit at times, and I think that's I think that's a team that's been so used to success as a team that they almost forget what struggle is sometimes, even though they haven't won at all. They've just walked to all these postseason successes that they've had at this point that you almost forget what it's like. And I think that they tasted some of that.
That Vegas Game 6 was embarrassing.
That was the one,
I thought.
and that was the one.
It's
It's like you're this team that's supposed to win. You've got cup. You got visions for the cup. You are a real contender. It's Game 6. You got a chance to shut this down, and you lose 4-0, and it was just an embarrassing effort. Guys just weren't moving their feet. Montreal looked like they wanted to be there. Montreal was working a lot harder. Vegas looked pretty apathetic in that game, and what are you going to do?
I sat down to watch a game, and I'm like, all right, here we go. Like, I thought the Golden Knights were going to at least push a Game 7. Nothing. It was a dud. I was like, why did I waste my night watching this stupid game? I was like, I think we're in agreement, right? I think Tampa's going to win. It seems like you think Tampa's going to win. How many games do you think it will take for Tampa to beat Montreal? I think a gentleman's sweep, is that possible? Maybe 6 games?
I think 6. And I actually want to make I want to correct myself because that Montreal for the 4-1 win was actually Game 5, not Game 6. Game 6 was the overtime when they won the series. It was game 5 to correct that. But yes, going back to your question, I think 6. I think there's going to be a couple of games where Price like steals it, and it's going to be the shot count is going to be like 37-21 in favor of Tampa, but it's like a 2-1 Montreal win, probably like in overtime or something like that, where Carey steals a couple of games. There's going to be something like that. I think you're not going to see out of Tampa. It's all good. You're fine. What you're not going to see out of Tampa, I think, in Vasilevsky is like handing somebody a goal with a minute and a half left in a game that you're winning. That's kind of you can ask a lot of Pittsburgh Penguins fans, especially from like 2012 to 2014, what Fleury is capable of in the postseason for the other team, and we saw it on display there in that game 3. Tampa's not going to make mistakes like that, I don't think. So Montreal's going to have to come. So they're going to have to come correct, and I think they can do it. I think this is going to be their toughest task yet, and that's all we can say. I think it's I'm rooting for Montreal because I think that story will be really cool. Even though as much as I love to jab Canadian hockey fans about Canada not having won a Stanley Cup, I think this Cinderella story usurps that to an extent. So I'd love to see it for Montreal, but as I've said for 3 podcasts now, I don't see it.
Yeah, I just looked. You're right. It was game 5. I don't know what I'm thinking. I remember just watching, going like, I remember watching, going, the effort isn't there, which is such a lame thing to say for someone. I feel like an outsider with hockey, but I remember being not impressed with the Golden Knights' effort and what they had to bring to the table. I guess it's game 5, right? 4-1. I think we both agree. I guess I should have listened more to what you're saying. I was so distracted with what I got wrong because I know.
It's all good. It's all good.
Anyway.
Yeah. No.
So you think 6 games?
I think 6 games. I think 6 is a comfortable place to put it. I think that it's just going to be too much for Montreal. I think that Tampa has far too much postseason experience. Montreal has killed 30 consecutive penalties, which is this outrageous number that they've managed to Vegas's power play, and that's like, as far as an X's and O's thing, that's a huge reason why Vegas couldn't take that series, is because they were absolutely anemic on the power play. They could not take advantage of their special teams working. And I mentioned it, I think, in our first episode doing this together, that special teams, your power play, is such a hugely important thing in the postseason because goals are so hard to come by. And if you can get those chances to get goals on the man advantage, you have to cash in. And Vegas just did not do that. Their power play performance was very, very poor. Montreal has, like I said, killed 30 straight penalties. If Montreal can continue to win the special teams, they're going to give themselves a real shot. Tampa's
will
power
they?
Plays,
Tampa's good.
And that's the hard part. Tampa is very good. Tampa's power play is like 38% or something insane like that. It's very, very good. That would win. If 38% over the course of a whole season, now granted sample sizes are a thing, I recognize that, but 38% over the course of a whole season would be an all-time great power play. So they're scoring on the man advantage at obscene rates. Montreal is shutting that down at a similar level. The special teams are going to matter a lot, and especially in the Cup final and in the deep playoff environments, officiating tends to get a little bit more loose. We see refs swallow the whistle. We see a lot more contact. So I think we're going to see a lot fewer penalties given out. So when they are given out, these teams that are the teams are going to have to do their best to convert, and I think that's where Tampa wins out. I think that Montreal, as good as they've been on the power play or on the penalty kill rather, I think Tampa's just a little bit too much. I don't think that Tampa continues to perform at this 40% level that they're almost at, and I don't think Montreal continues to kill 30 straight penalties. I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle, and where that skews, I think is going to be a huge determining factor of who takes this series home.
Well, I walked away from this conversation feeling like, hey, we got watch power plays. That'll play a factor somehow.
Huge
How
deal.
well does Carey Price do? Can Tampa win in 6? How long does it take them to beat Montreal? Can Montreal play together? That's another big factor. That's 4 things. 6 games maybe. Can Montreal play together? How does power plays work? And how does Carey Price do? Is there anything else? Any other factors I should look for during this series?
I think that's a good place especially if you're kind of a hockey layman. I think that's a good place to start. If you're we see it a lot on sportscasts. The keys to the game, or this or that. 3 or 4 points. I think you've got them right there. It's special teams, it's Montreal's depth production, and it's Carey Price.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Any other thoughts you want to talk about?
Man, I almost want to. I just have. This is so fun. I want to just keep discussing stuff. But the fight question that we went on a tangent about last week was really the only pressing hockey.
I have a
hockey
follow-up thought
question I
there.
had okay, yeah, let's
So
talk about
I
it.
think I said I think it's very middle America. I think if I could go back, the word I would use is blue collar. I'm a blue collar guy. Like I worked
Yep.
my ass off. I worked at a car wash for 4 years, and I worked 7 days a week. And I think fighting to kind of say in a better way what I said last episode is fighting in hockey isn't going to push out any new fan base. The people that are interested in hockey are blue collar people. They're not soft. They're not afraid. No
I
one's
think
going to
that's
go,
fair, yeah.
oh, he's got blood. I was
And
watching
even if
some
they're not
elimination
blue
game.
collar
Yeah.
people, they respect blue collar habits.
Yeah. I
So
can't remember what game I was watching, but I remember some team won, and the captain had blood all over his face, and I was like, and he was like high-fiving everybody as they walked off the court. He was the last guy to leave.
It was Corey Perry, who's not a captain, or not the captain of Montreal. He might wear an A. He might be an alternate captain, but it's Corey Perry, who had taken a high stick, an uncalled high stick. It opened up his nose real good. He had to go back to the locker room and get zipped up. And before he had returned to the bench, Montreal had won the game. It was an overtime game. I believe it was game 3.
I watched the last 20 minutes of that game, and I remember the whole team all of Montreal's walking off. He's the last guy. He high-fived everybody as they left, and he's got blood all over his face. And I'm like, that's a warrior. I love that.
Yeah.
I hate soccer. This is awesome. Like I just had this moment. I'm like, this is why hockey's great. That moment.
Yeah, he was mid getting treatment for getting a stick in the face, and and man, it's getting a stick in the face. Like it's never happened to me personally, but I've been around it, and it's not fun. You think it's like just this stick. How is it going to be? How is it going to open you up like that? It might hurt. It might leave a bruise, but what the pain he was feeling in that moment, or maybe after the game, maybe not in that moment, but immediately after, was so severe, and it all washes away because his team won an overtime game and took a 2-1 series lead. That was game 3. That was the Fleury game. He gets hurt, I believe, right before overtime, or maybe at the start of overtime is when he had gotten that stick. And then Montreal wins that game, and he storms out of the locker room with still, like you're describing, blood running down the left side of his face, and he's high-fiving and congratulating everybody. He was so pumped, and that's hockey in a nutshell right there, right? Like that's exactly what you're describing, but yeah, no, I think the blue collar thing you've made a point there, because this is a game where guys like that can survive. In hockey, you don't need to be 7 feet tall. You don't need to be absurdly athletic. This is a sport that physically, when it comes to your own, your genetics, your physical makeup, I think is quite accessible, and that is made so by the fact that if you are someone who works really, really hard and doesn't care as much about stats and is willing to grind and is willing to get dirty and do the hard stuff and get hurt every now and again, not even fighting, just blocking shots or hitting guys or being in front of the net, setting screens. This is a game where you can survive all the way up to the NHL just by making plays like that. It's very accessible to guys who are willing to do the dirty work like that. And I think that encompasses fighting to an extent, that a lot of guys make their careers off of doing dirty work like fighting and blocking shots and hitting and being in front of the net, being a big body. This is an accessible game for people who want to do hard work like that, and fighting's part of it.
Here's what I'm excited about for the NHL Stanley Cup Finals is I've been catching games here and there throughout the entire playoffs, but I haven't sat down and watched an entire series through and through. I've just been people know I'm moving literally across the ocean. The NBA's been like, I got to cover that. I make more money covering that. But I'm really excited because I'm going to give the Stanley Cup Finals my full attention. I'm going to watch game 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, hopefully 7 if we get there. And I think that next time we talk, I'm gonna have so much more to say, and we'll share these exciting moments and this and that. I'm gonna take detailed notes, and I
want to do that. I'm glad you brought that up. I think that because there's only one series, because it's not as much game watching for you and for me, frankly. I think that instead of talking about the story, because that'll be easy to get kind of into the nitty gritty of off the bat, I want to actually go through and talk about what happened on the ice. Like I want to do like a I'll be right there with you. I'll be taking notes. I'll give timestamps. I want to actually talk about the games and what happened, and moments. And we can let moments exactly, and we can let the story kind of play out how it will. Whether that is Montreal, whether that's Tampa, because they're both playing for something really significant, a back-to-back championship versus a Cinderella story. There's both, there's a lot of significance there in the storylines. So we can let that settle as it is. But I'm looking forward to getting back here and talking about what happened between the lines for 60+ minutes a game over the course of that series.
Well, I think we're gonna have to talk about 5, 6, maybe 7 games for an hour and a half. It's going to be hard to do, actually, because when I don't know about you, I take very detailed notes, and it's like we're going to be like, can you believe this? Can you believe that? And we'll text each other as we go, and we'll be like, it'll be bottled up, this energy we want to share.
Yeah.
So I honestly, I think that'll be probably, because to talk about one series for that amount for a whole show, that'll be fun. And that's what I look forward to. I think the next episode we do about the NHL is going to be so much fun. I just can't wait for it.
We can get into the weeds, and that's what's fun for people like me, is we can really, we can spend a real amount of time like getting into the nitty gritty about what happened, and that's what's exciting for me. So I'm excited to do that. I'm excited to watch this series. By this time tomorrow, we're gonna have some serious answers because the game will be over or almost over. So yeah, it's gonna be awesome, man.
Awesome, Austin, you're the man. We will watch tomorrow. It's Monday morning for you guys out there. Until then, have a great day. You guys are awesome. I love you. And I think that's all we have, right, Austin? I think that's the show.
That is the show. Uncaged Pod, episode 1 of our Dustin Poirier documentary went up last week. As I'm recording this right now, Sunday night, our unbelievable interview with Ensign Inoue and his life as a member of the Yakuza and as an MMA fighter. He detailed that for us. We had a great conversation with Ensign. And then we've got a conversation going up on Monday, when you listen to this, with New England Cartel coach Tyson Chartier. He was an awesome guy. We were allowed to talk to him too. So lots of stuff going up on the feed over on the Uncaged Pod.
And to be clear, Austin, send me a link to both. I'll make them the
Yes.
pinned comment under this podcast on YouTube.
Thank you, Zach. Wonderful.
Awesome. Love you guys. Have a great day. Ba-dum-bum. Bam. We are done.